catching the body language. I've got to fly away in 20 minutes, that's all. Thanks, and thanks, Chair. While we're on homelessness then, can you tell us when we're going to see a bill and whether it's intended that that be debated and passed this year?
Senator, the timing of the bill is a matter for the Minister. He's currently considering the submissions on the exposure draft.
Okay, so you have no visibility at all as to whether we're going to be debating that this year or not?
That's a matter for the government.
Okay, I mean, you'd be aware all this bill is a definition. It doesn't actually do anything. It's a definition of we understand what homelessness is. And so, just for the record, imagine if we'd spent 4 years waiting for a climate change bill and then the bill arrived and all it was a definition of what we think climate change is. It's, I think, a remarkable opportunity missed. I'll put
Senator,
this... Sorry, Mr Innes, it's just been flipped to the government, that's all. Minister, can you tell us whether this is going to be debated and passed this year or not?
I'll seek some advice from the Minister.
Thank you. Mr Innes, sorry.
Senator, I can inform the committee of what's happened since the last estimates. So since the last estimates, we have released an exposure draft of the bill on the 5th of June. That submissions closed on the 3rd of August. 55 submissions were received and obviously the department's done an analysis of those submissions for the Minister, looking at what the suggestions for change were in the bill and providing some advice on that. The Minister's considered that, and we're in the process of providing drafting instructions for the Office of Parliamentary Counsel to do the final drafting of a bill. But the timing of introduction is something that we can't specifically comment on.
I understand that. I understand that's out of your hands. All right. Well, we'll have to come back to this later, but you know, you can hear the frustration. Can I just quickly, and depending on how complex the answer is, you can take this on notice because I've actually got quite a bit that I'd like to traverse. What's the impact of the efficiency dividend on the housing assistance, homelessness and affordability unit of FAXIA?
So, Senator, the efficiency dividend obviously applies across the departmental funding. Yep. And the department has gone through a process of working through how we find efficiencies and apply that efficiency dividend. Yep. So I wouldn't be able to give you specifics, but the application has been more general across the department, and where there's particular priority needs, then we're looking at how we move our resources around within the department to address those priority needs for the government.
That really gives us nothing at all to go on. Has it cost you any full-time employees, for example, through redundancies or natural attrition or whatever? Just in the housing unit.
Senator, it's not possible to answer that question, and for the reasons Ms Carroll has just run through. It is the efficiency dividend is not applied specifically to a particular group or branch or section. It is applied across the department, and we, as a matter of course, throughout the year, move money around to resource priorities. It is not possible to answer that question.
Wow, it's remarkable. If I go and ask anybody else, they'll say the same thing. So these savings are being found magically, as though you just had people sitting around. And no, I know that you don't. But
certainly the savings not found magically. We've put a lot of effort into finding efficiencies around IT, around travel, around video conferencing, around reducing publications. It goes on. Okay.
Mr Innes, during the last estimate session, you mentioned that you'd provided some departmental advice to the Minister on our convert to rent model. Are you familiar with that? I think I've tabled it 3 or 4 times. I can table it again if that's helpful. Can you provide us with a copy of that advice, or just go to what its general nature was?
Senator, as a matter of course, we don't provide our advice to government.
Never hurts to ask, though, does it? Was it positive?
As a matter of course, Senator.
Oh. Are you aware of whether or not that model has been progressed at all at a departmental level? Was that going anywhere, or have you received any feedback, for example?
Senator, my answer would be the same, that
I can legitimately ask you whether the department's working on anything along those lines of an incentive to get vacant commercial or residential space back onto the market, though, can't I? Can I ask you that?
You can, Senator. Senator, the department always is working on a range of different policy initiatives, policy directions
Yeah,
that
can I ask you
are
specifically
provided
about this one?
very specifically. Like, I wouldn't be able to give you a specific example on that, answer on that particular initiative, but we are always looking around, looking at what policy initiatives are there and providing advice to government.
Yeah, no, I get that as a general description of what you do, and I'm very supportive of what you do. As a department currently working on an incentive scheme for getting empty, vacant space back onto the affordable housing market.
That would fall under the category of the nature and content of our advice to government. And
No,
I
I'm not asking if you've...
I can't tell you one way or
Yes, you
another.
can. I'm not asking whether you've advised the government. I'm asking if anybody's working on it. That's an entirely legitimate question to put to you. If the answer's no, it's fine. I'll move on.
Without wanting to get into a sort of complex debate around this,
We can keep it simple.
if hypothetically we were working on such a thing right now,
Yeah.
and the government planned to make an announcement on it in the near future, and we were to tell you that, yes, we are working on that, we might actually preempt the government's decision. So you can rest assured that we are looking at all aspects of these areas, and we provide advice to government across the board.
I want to just touch on two quick issues relating to the supply gap, which is real and acknowledged right across the board, and vacancy rates, or real vacancy rates. Have you done an analysis based on the last ABS data between 06 and 2011 on what I think is, I guess, is actually a contradiction, that we're seeing a severe supply gap open up at the same time as vacancy rates appear to be going up as well. Have you noted or done any analysis on that trend?
Senator, so supply issues are the responsibility of the Treasury portfolio, and that question would be best directed towards Treasury.
Okay, but the vacancy issues, that's not within your domain either? I think I've commented before on how silly
certainly
that is.
so I participate in the National Housing Supply Council,
Yeah.
so we do connect very strongly with Treasury on the issues, and we analyse what they mean for our responsibilities. But in terms of providing information to you as Senator, it would be a question better directed towards Treasury.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Just coming to the figures, I actually found it quite useful that Senator Payne traversed the kind of broad brush portfolio allocations that fall within housing and homelessness. But I'm interested to know the degree to which you are able to keep track of what the state housing authorities are doing. So, for example, I can table this if you like. The recent census data identifies that between 2006 and 2011, in the electorate of Melbourne as a sample, the total number of dwellings owned by state housing authorities decreased from 7,291 to 7,172, so a net decrease of 119. So the Commonwealth is pumping money into affordable housing. We don't think it's enough, and we think it could be better deployed, but it's there and it wasn't there before. How do we stop the state housing authorities simply drawing funding out at the same time as you're topping it up?
Senator, I'm not aware of the specifics of the example you give.
We can come back to it if you like. I can table these if you'd like to see a copy.
That's always helpful to...
Okay. Can I just, through the chair, I don't need leave, do I? I can just table.
You've asked us to table.
All right. So what I've got here are two extracts from the census on public housing, tenure and landlord type by dwelling structure, and it identifies state and territory housing authorities' property has actually declined between the two censuses. So could I get that provided to the officers, and then we can come back to it perhaps?
As a general response though, Senator, the management of social housing stock is a matter for the states.
Yeah,
and
it is.
clearly so under the relevant Commonwealth State agreement. So thank you very much.
No, I understand that, and that is actually precisely the point that I'm getting to.
But it is a concern to government that the investments are adding to stock.
Yes, certainly. But do we know that they actually are? If the state housing authorities are selling stock down faster than the Commonwealth can top it up, that's a shell game going on. That's extremely unfortunate. It's not increasing supply. An example from my home state, WA, the state housing authority there has sold 6,000 properties over a decade, at the same time as the Commonwealth is trying to prop it up.
So, Senator, I guess at a broader level, and Mr Innes can kind of go into further detail, but we know we've traversed in this committee before the way the intergovernmental agreements are written and the information that's required from states and territories in terms of reporting on the NAHA.
Okay.
And so one of kind of going to the kinds of questions that you're asking, which is, does the state government provide us with reporting on stock numbers, transfer numbers, those sorts of things? Under the National Affordable Housing Agreement, they're not required to give us that detailed information. We certainly, as a department and for the government, try to look at the available information that we can get. Through public sources and those other sorts of things.
You're right. We have traversed this before. So the NAHA's being renegotiated, so we're told. Is that something that can be fixed? Remarkable that you would have to resort to open source data about what the public housing authorities are doing around the country in order to work out whether there's actually a net increase occurring or not. If I could just go to... Sure.
Help, and thank you very much for the table. It was very helpful. One of the things that is occurring in the broader social housing environment is a move towards community housing. As I read these figures, they relate to public housing specifically, so state-owned housing.
Yeah.
I can inform the committee that between 2007, for example, and 2011, community housing dwelling stock increased from 34,707 to 59,777.
Would the census pick that up, or would it still be listed as public housing?
On the table that you've provided, it's not listed separately, and I suspect state-owned housing means state-owned housing, not the broader social housing system. I just wanted to say that there are a couple of dynamics that need to be considered in making an assessment on the availability of social housing.
Could you check for us, I'm going to have to speed things up a little because I've got to go, but could you check for us on notice whether or not the way the ABS is reporting, whether community housing would be rolled into the public housing or whether it's been disaggregated into somewhere else?
Senator, on the details of a census, can I suggest...
I would have to talk to the ABS.
Would you?
Okay. Look, on the NAHA, Treasury's doing a technical review of the NAHA. From your point of view, or are you aware, I can put this to Treasury, but are you aware of whether or not reporting obligations are going to be part of the next?
They are not.
They're not?
Sorry, they're not part of the technical review, which is focused on the performance framework rather than the reporting framework.
Okay. The thing is, if the NAHA gets renegotiated and this giant data gap is a part of it, it's going to make a lot of us pretty cranky to come in here and have you say, oh, we can't tell you, we don't know. This is the opportunity to make sure that that information exchange is part of it. And just for the record, the figure of 6,000 that I gave you in WA was strictly sell-offs to the private market. So that's, you were quoting me numbers back from Melbourne there, were you, or all of Victoria?
No, this was across the country
across
for the community
total.
housing sector.
All right. Look, the COAG Reform Council's evaluation of the NAHA through their housing affordability report was pretty damning. I don't expect you to comment on my editorialising, but they basically failed the agreement. They've said it's just not working, and against the major indicators or outcomes that the NAHA was meant to deliver, despite the $20 billion in funding, give or take, that you've identified for us this morning, actually we're going backwards. So I'll just quote, no indication of progress towards the outcomes. Nationally, no indication housing affordability is improved. Rental affordability is worsened, especially for those on the lowest incomes, and homes are less affordable for buyers. So that's everybody. Homelessness has increased over that period as well, though that's not a quote. Your response to me might be, well, imagine how bad it would have been if we hadn't spent the $20 billion. But what are we doing in the renegotiation of the NAHA to actually deliver the outcomes that we set for ourselves? How would the next 5 years be any different?
Senator, and I don't have the detail of the report in front of me, but I think my recollection is the COAG Reform Council was looking at two things. Where it had data, it was pointing to what that data was telling us, and I think the rental affordability example you gave is a clear case where there is data.
Yeah.
There are other instances in the report where the Reform Council's expressing concern that we don't have the data to measure accurately where we're up to. So I just want to say there are two things came out of that report for me. You made the obvious point of, in the absence of the funding from government, what the situation would be. In our advice to government, we're always looking at ways to ensure that the housing market is better, the whole housing market is better responding to the needs of Australians.
Okay. But it's not particularly growing evaluation of the last couple of years, which tells me that we can't just keep doing the same thing. Would you be able to... No, I'll have to move on. I've just got a couple of quick questions on NRAS, then I'll pass you back to the Chair. It appears that there's still a major squeeze in the approval process, that NRAS isn't staffed to the degree that it needs to be. I've had investors tell me that when they're putting together the deals, they have to leave NRAS out because it basically takes too long. You can't include NRAS as a fundamental part of your business model because you don't know if you're going to get the incentives, and it takes too long anyhow. So it ultimately ends up kind of being icing on the cake for some of the people that I've been talking to. If they eventually get some incentives, then that's all to the good. But to me, that defeats the purpose of what the scheme was really for. These are places that would be built anyhow. Can you tell us what's happened in terms of the approval process? Is it speeding up, and what's being done to do so?
So, Kath Mandley here from Housing Affordability Programs. I'm the branch manager. Senator, just to clarify with your question, when you talk about the approval process, what approval process do you
Senator,
mean?
I might start by observing that NRAS incentives are released by way of rounds.
Yeah.
So there have been 4 rounds to date, and that's the opportunity for someone to gain an incentive. And there was a set of approval processes and decision-making processes around those rounds.
Yeah.
We would acknowledge that round 4 did not go as quickly as possible, and that in any future round we are looking very closely at how to make sure that our decision-making processes are speedy and appropriate. Once someone has been allocated an incentive, then there are other decision-making processes that come into play if they want to vary their delivery. So it just depends a bit on where in the process your concern most lies.
When you say you're looking closely at it, though, I would hope for any future round, around 5, that I think it just looks to me as though it needs more staff time. It needs more people working for Ms Mandler to get them out the door faster.
I'm sure Ms Mandler's happy to...
There I am, advocating for getting the incentives out the door. It may be that Senator Payne's about to beat you up for how slow these incentives are getting out the door. I'll leave that to her. This is a scheme that works, and I've had almost uniformly positive feedback from the sector. It's doing what it was intended to do.
But it has problems.
It has some problems. I'll leave you in Senator Payne's capable hands.